The purpose of the Global CFO Council is to provide an educational and networking forum for senior financial executives in order to share best practices, discuss current financial issues, and to learn about current topics related to the performance of their jobs. Membership is open to senior financial executives including CFOs, financial VPs, and treasurers. We hope that you'll become a member of the Global CFO Council today. To join, please visit the membership tab at globalcfocouncil.com.
Rick, something I didn't tell you is that I do something fun, is that I did print off your bio, but I'm not going to read much of it. I just try to find things out about you by searching the interwebs, and then I share it just before you speak. So, are you ready, sir?
I hope so, yeah.
Some of this may or may not be true. It is a Rick Wheeler. I just don't know if it's going to be you. Let's start off with the official from the bio. Rick Wheeler is the Executive Director of Asset Management at Lifecycle Engineering, Certified Reliability Leader, Certified Six Sigma Green Belt, ISO 55000 expert. Is that correct, sir?
That's correct.
Looking on the interwebs, it looked like you had a long career, not too long, but long-ish career at other firms before joining Lifecycle Engineering. You were working at Pfizer, Monsanto, Eli Lilly, and Elanco. I think that's how you pronounce it.
Right. Yeah.
And here's some interesting things that I know about you, that I think some of these things are true. And I don't have pictures, folks. Normally I would share pictures, Rick, but you don't share a lot of pictures on the internet. And I searched really hard trying to find them. But one, I know you got some grandkids, and they are the love of your life. I think you play some golf. Is that correct?
That's right.
You did you sell a car to buy a really fast golf cart?
That is true. That did happen, yes.
Into bourbons, like to dance. You're a parrot head. You live in one of those communities for a bunch of, it's like a drinking community with houses, a housing problem, I think.
Yes. Yeah.
And you have participated in a pirate ship competition.
All true. Yes, that's true.
I really wish I had pictures. I will continue to search, and if I can find those pictures, then I will post them on the internet shortly. Rick, I'm looking really forward to your presentation, very timely on digital transformations and understanding Industry 4.0. They combine together perfectly, and I'm looking forward to the presentation. I'll be monitoring the chat box and hit you with some questions here about halfway through your presentation.
Sounds great. Thank you, Robert. And thank you for the opportunity to present to this group. Robert kind of explained to me this, different levels of experience and interest in the topic. So I'm going to start pretty high level and make sure we're kind of grounded on some common terms, and then we'll dig into it a little deeper. So just to start off, let's understand what when we say Industry 4.0, what is that? And this is the Wikipedia definition, so we know how good that is, but really it is that ongoing automation of traditional manufacturing. So there's a lot happening in manufacturing, a lot of different market drivers, a lot of reasons that these things are happening, but really trying to leverage the technology that's becoming available, the Internet of Things, to integrate the automation, improve communication, really ultimately to create a smart factory. So lots of different drivers. I would argue one of them being just the pure lack of resources to run our plants. Also, when we build budgets for plants, that labor, resources are one of the largest line items. So if we can build smart factories, you hear more advanced companies having kind of lights out manufacturing, where they basically run the machines run themselves and mend themselves and notify people when they need to come to address them. But other than that, they are pretty autonomous. So that's certainly one extreme end, but I guess that's if we want to set a gold standard out there, a vision for what this could become, that's probably where we're trying to go. Industry 5.0 is actually being talked about, and that's actually cobots. That's actually having robots out there that are working with and or for the human. So to even reduce the amount of humans we have in our plant. So just a little history on it. That's a nice definition, but just think about it from this evolutionary standpoint. The steam engine, those type of things being Industry 1.0, mass production, Henry Ford, the assembly line, being the Industry 2.0. frankly, most companies are still kind of sticking somewhere around that 2.0 to 3.0 world. I mean, we deal with a lot of different clients, different types of clients and industries. Like Robert said, my background is pharmaceutical manufacturing, but we deal with lots of different industries and companies. And somewhere between kind of production line assembly and automation and computers is kind of where most people live today. Especially before COVID. Again, COVID's changed a lot, and people are starting to say, well, we probably need to think about how to get more advanced. And as the technology becomes, faster, cheaper, and more easily to install. So 4.0 is really that leveraging of those technologies and creating that Internet of Things to use machine learning, AI, those type of things. So if you think about your personal facility and company, you probably, again, the vast majority of people we do assessments for, they're still living somewhere in that industry 3.0, maybe 3.5, something like that. But certainly seeing a big push toward the industry 4.0 as we go forward. So what is 4.0? Just there's a lot of different models. You can Google it and you can just find pages and pages. I just picked two of the different models that I kind of thought spoke to what components of an industry 4.0, or as my boss calls it 4.0, which is probably more technically correct. So, so really it's starts with the human machine interface, using how we interact with our systems, how we have sensors, how monitoring tools, instruments, control systems, robots, as I mentioned, more and more application of robots to replace tedious tasks that people do on the line or highly critical tasks. You think about, in the medical field, there's robots that does the surgery right through the guidance. So all those things overlaid with an IT OT infrastructure. So the computer network, if you will, that all this stuff goes into. The model on the left kind of speaks a little more to that with the cloud computing. Of course, when you start running data through the cloud, you have cybersecurity issues, and those are certainly prevalent in the industry. People worry about the cybersecurity. How do we maintain, once we have computers running in our facility, how do we make sure our computers don't become infected and hacked in some way? One of we're seeing a lot is the augmented reality, that kind of lower left bubble on the left right hand chart. But augmented reality is particularly being used to help make sure we error proof. Can use augmented reality to help people set the equipment up properly, to kind of document that they set it up properly. You can have instructions appear on their goggles, and you can also film what they did so that information can be stored in a system to show that in fact the machine was set up properly, the task was done correctly, those type of things. So augmented reality is certainly a big part of it. And simulations, when you get into more advanced industry 4.0 applications, there's a lot of the simulation. Now that we've built a model, how can we run different iterations, assuming different things happen, and see what the end result of our production will be, or the impact of those changes. So again, lots of different models, which is part of the problem I think with the application of it, is because the industry 4.0 or digital transformation means a lot of different things to different people. So what are the goals of it? Again, there's tons of stuff. You can Google this, but what are people hoping to accomplish? And just one example is an IBM survey saying 34% of the companies are looking at adopting AI technology, which was up significantly from the year prior. And I think this is actually probably our early COVID kind of a survey that was done. Some more recent stuff I've looked at suggesting maybe about 41% of companies are moving toward that now in the last couple of years. But again, what are the goals of that? Is really taking that new technology, providing real-time information to the operators so they can more intelligently address the operation. It allows them to, in simple terms, make sure the right information is available to the right people in the right context for better decision making, which ultimately that's how we improve productivity. In their particular case, they're talking about yield improvements of up to 30% from the proper application of Industry 4.0 AI technology and reductions of waste. Again, there's tons of studies out there of the benefits and what leading companies are seeing as benefits of adopting some of these processes. And again, you'd have to look at each one of those. There's a lot of different variability of how those things are adopted, and frankly, the system is broken down to enough components that you can do the business case and understand what portions of that will benefit you the most. Was it the robotics, the augmented reality, et cetera? What would be the most beneficial to you? So again, lots of drive. I'm sure many of you, if we were in a big conference room, we could probably raise your hands, and there's many of you that are somewhere along that journey, somewhere along that path toward a digital transformation, Industry 4.0 application. Some need some compelling reason in your organization that you'd be looking at. So if there are such benefits, I mean, what I want to talk about next is a little bit about what are the obstacles that are preventing us from getting started? And again, from our perspective and what we've seen in the marketplace. So obstacles for the digital journey, lack of a clear objective vision. I mean, our experience, certainly other surveys of other companies that I've read recently point back to this as being one of the number one road obstacles or roadblocks. What is a clear objective? I mean, if it's the IT group leading this, there may be an application of a bunch of sensors. If it's the production group leading this, it may be some support of their batch record or online monitoring of production performance. If it's the maintenance group, it may be some sensors that help them move from a time-based maintenance plan to a predictive maintenance or condition-based monitoring system. Lack of skilled workforce, right? So, that's both sides of the equation. We have a lack of skilled workforce just coming into the marketplace right now. I'm seeing personally, and what I've read is, turnover is extremely high. We have the Great Resignation happening. We have this mass migration of people from one industry to another, or to early retirement, or wherever they're going. But there's a lack of skilled workforce to just do what we've traditionally done, and certainly when it comes to having the skills and understanding of the new digital world, there's a certainly lack of a skilled, trained workforce to take those jobs on. Difficulty integrating various technologies. We have plants that are 50 years old, right? We have plants that just barely have some basic distributed control systems, or even individual PLCs that run the equipment at the individual level, and they're not networked together. So you try to overlay that and integrate all those various data points into some meaningful data pool that you can analyze and make it useful information of. You can imagine certainly some of the difficulties there. So many times that's going to require something of a capital investment, or some technology specific alignment to make sure that data can be accessed and readily available. And then one we see very often is just trying to apply 4.0 concepts in a 3.0 environment. And what I mean by that is, if you don't have a functioning work order system, if you don't have a comprehensive asset hierarchy, if you haven't done a value stream map and really understand how the production from equipment A feeds equipment B, feeds equipment C, and where those bottlenecks in your system are, and what the impacts of those disconnects are, it's going to be very difficult to then develop an advanced computer model of that, for instance. So if you don't really understand the implications, if you don't have the data to build a robust model, it can be very challenging. So setting the vision. So what is your vision? I wanted to cover a couple terms because I think it's kind of important. But for that, and say throughout this presentation, we'll use digital transformation, we'll use Industry 4.0, we'll use smart plan. I mean, again, there's many different names of this, but they're all around the same thing. But as I mentioned, I came from the pharmaceutical industry, so converting paper to digital is a big push. And when you talk about what does digital transformation look like in a certain industry, in that industry, we have something called a batch record. So as we're making the product, as we're making the drug, there's steps and hold points and verification steps along the way. That's how we verify that the product was made per its designed validated state, and how we therefore can make sure that product's going to be safe and effective in the marketplace. So we go through this process as we're making the compound. We document all these steps into a when I was in the industry, into a paper batch record, basically. Then that batch record goes to a quality group and they review it, and any deficiencies get discussed and reviewed and make sure that we can truly verify that that product is as it's supposed to be. Well, in the pharmaceutical industry, there's a lot of push now to automate that, to capture that information real time, and again, through the various methods I've mentioned, including just the computers, the generated signals or the information that was captured during the process as it was being made, as a way to more quickly be able to make a product and then release it and convert it to cash, right? So we know, I can tell you horror stories about places I've worked where we had multi-millions of dollars of products sitting on QA hold while we were just, disputing and sorting out the batch record discrepancies. So quicker we can make our product and get it to market, the quicker we can realize our cash. So for that industry, it may be digital transformation just means for you is just we want to get out of the paperwork business and get into a digital record. For some companies, and that's called digitization, by the way, there's some specific breakdown of that. To some companies, it's creating a digital twin, BIM models, so we can leverage technology, collect process and asset data information, so we can have a computer simulation. We can use that to run and make changes to our physical facility through this computer model, and that's kind of that digital twin of our facility. And that one is referred to as digitalization. So digital transformation is really it's a larger, it's all those things, but really is more accelerating transformation of business activities, processes, competencies, models to fully leverage and change, and help us understand the impact on the strategy and prioritization. So that's really when we talk about the different variations of digital transformation. That's really the whole enchilada, if you will. That's the full model where we're going to deploy many of those technologies. All of them are valid, right? I mean, just digitization of the valid digital transformation of it. So again, you need to make sure it fits for your business and has the proper return on investment. So basically, what we're really struggling with here is how we're going to define that. And what we really look at when we're talking about digital transformation and the way we approach that to support that is really the harmonization of the people, the process, and the technology. And I know that's pretty high level, not probably very revolutionary, but I mean, that's truly, at the end of the day, that's really what we have that we're dealing with, and we're trying to synchronize. So the question I would ask you is, we can talk about people, processes, and technology, but in what context? I mean, there's lots of different directions you could go if we all depend on our seat in the organization and our particular passions and background and experience. There's many things we could focus on there in people and process and technology. So what we refer to as a good guidance document is the ISO 55000 standard. So that is really the document out there. It's an international standard, came out in 2014. It really helps us understand our corporate policy strategies at the very top of that model. We then translate that into what portion of that is managed by these physical assets that we're trying to apply these technologies to. We develop our policies and strategies and our competence. But this really helps us set the framework for what assets, what are they supposed to do, how are they supposed to perform, and that's really translated into the stakeholder analysis. So it tells us that first, ISO tells us the first thing we need to do to understand that asset framework is to do our stakeholder analysis. And specifically, section 4.2 talks about the stakeholder analysis. And kind of at a high level, what they're really saying we need to understand is who are the stakeholders. Those are internal and external stakeholders. So who cares about what we do? It's regulatory, certainly environmental. We got to be safe and help and do it without hurting people or hurting the environment. It's also internal. It's also fiduciary. We need to return on our shareholder expectations. We need to provide a safe environment and a good environment for our internal employees. So many different stakeholders need to analyze who they are. What do they expect of us? Again, depending on regulatory or fiduciary, you can imagine that. And what's their decision criteria? So how are they making the decision that we are meeting those objectives, that we are, in fact, the company that they want to work with and that they want to buy their products from? We've all seen the things going on in the marketplace now with lots of different decision-making criteria and who wants to buy from what company because of whatever positions they've taken, those type of things. So we understand that there is a real there's options in the marketplace, and we need to understand our stakeholders, what they expect and how they decide that we are meeting those expectations. And then what's their reporting requirements? So again, that's kind of an ISO speak version of how we go about defining our stakeholder requirements for our assets, which sets us up then to start having that overall framework. So once we've got the stakeholder context, we can begin our transformation. Now we understand what assets, what they're supposed to do, and we can start talking about how we align the people, the processes, and the technology within that organizational context. So at a high level, just wanted to kind of touch on this at a high level. What we've talked about so far is really analyzing the stakeholders, starting to prepare the people. And we list it this way because we do believe this is the right order. I mean, we need to engage our workforce and our teams in that journey that we've set out. We need to make sure we have the people involved in participating. We need to then, we can look at our processes. These are our tools, techniques, SOPs, procedures, those type of things that we have in place that start setting some standards for how our data is being generated, collected, stored, and ultimately analyzed. Then we can prepare the technology. There are companies out there that will sell you need to go buy some technology, and then you just build the best model you can, and it'll show you where gaps are, and then you can go back and do these other things. Well, I guess that would work, but the clearest path to success is going to be through aligning your stakeholders, your people, your process, and then the technology, and then you're ready to deploy that. So at that point, Robert, I think we'll pause for any questions.
I do. I have a bunch, so I'm going to hit you rapid fire. Okay, Rick.
All right. Yep.
First one is, it applies to this. It came earlier, but it applies to this too. When reviewing either objective or vision or the stakeholder analysis, do you recommend a traditional approach to that or an agile approach to that?
Well, yeah, I guess it depends on the size of the organization, the complexity, right? I mean, so certainly we believe in more of an agile approach, right? We understand the pace of business today is we can't sit around and do analysis for a year or 2 years. We need to have some stage gates approach to that. Let's do certain tasks, validate, move forward while we're building out the rest of it. So certainly, I think with the pace of business, an agile approach is going to be the preferred method, especially for some more complex systems.
Question number 2 is around timeline, and I'm going to abbreviate here, but this timeline sometimes is not followed in a lot of places I've worked because of just the time, right? That this planning process takes a lot of time, let alone execution. And a lot of executives, their term is 3 to 5 years. So how do you balance that as a senior leader, that your time may be really short-lived before on average you quit or get fired? So how does an executive team do this right, knowing that there's such a time constraint for some?
Yeah, and I think that's one of the real advantages of kind of anchoring this under that ISO 55000 model, because again, it really is about optimizing the performance of your business against your stakeholder requirements. So regardless of who's the CEO or who's the CFO, they're going to have their different flavors of that, but ultimately they're all still to make the business as profitable and attractive and successful as possible. So I think if we can get back to some of that stakeholder analysis, again, there may be certain people that say, well, I have more of a passion toward the technology or the people or the process side, but at least if it's the true north is we want to figure out how to make our company the most attractive it can based on our stakeholders. And by the way, stakeholder requirements change, right? Just because you identify them one time doesn't mean you stop looking at that. There needs to be a continuous improvement process to make sure we're meeting our stakeholder requirements, but B, adapting ourselves as those change over time.
Next question, Rick. You mentioned a 4.0 and a 3.0 world. We got some comments around, well, this is 4.0, I work in a 1.0 kind of world. And I think I've worked in some of those companies too. I mean, I've worked at plants with some of our global operations had irregular electricity. And so how do you handle this 4.0 in a 1.0 world? You might have irregular electricity, irregular internet connectivity, very, very slow, irregular internet connectivity. How do you juggle?
Yeah, and it's a fact of life, right? I mean, like as I mentioned, a lot of the older facilities, they just don't have the infrastructure to support some of them, the advanced vision of the model, right? The holistic IT/OT stack and all the things that are happening there. So, but there can be applications of still value streaming that process, understanding where the failures are occurring, and then applying the technology and the people in the process to those bottlenecks. It can be done in a more local perspective. Now, again, if we're talking about our stakeholder requirements, I mean, there's probably bigger issues to be, resolved if we don't have consistent power feeds and those kind of things. Those probably should be some of our capital plans to try to improve that. But like any of that, it also starts with, what's the impact to our business and what's it preventing us from doing, and then what's it worth to spend? How much would we spend to resolve that issue? Right? It gets back to that. So again, I think having that true north of what is my stakeholder, how do I stay in business or how to succeed in business will allow you to start at least addressing some of those things based on facts and data.
You mentioned advanced robotics like cobots or autonomous mobile robotics. Have you seen any use cases or examples of cobots in place being used in manufacturing, or autonomous mobile robots being used?
Certainly, the autonomous mobile robots from the standpoint of, some companies have, material transportation, right? So, bin full of parts, it gets to a certain point, the transportation system, arguably a robot that brings the replenished parts based on some signal that it's time to bring those parts there. Cobots, not quite so much yet from my personal experience. Of certainly have looked at some examples of that, but from our experience, we haven't got to that level yet. But you can certainly imagine, that that the cobot is kind of working side by side and vision systems, those type of things, helping an operator inspect the component as it comes down the line, and it's picking out the items that it thinks may be defective, and the operator's making the final call would be an example of kind of that application.
I mean, that would stress me out if I'm working next to a bot and it's doing better QA than I am, or be like, man,
Right.
this is just not fair. I'd be trying to slow that robot down, talking to it, tell it stories, something.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Any industries that are leading or that you can share that are sort of leading in this area or lagging? Some industries that are just not cut out for this and that they're likely going to be lagging in this. Or any company is a newer company more apt to be leading in this area, and legacy companies are going to have a challenge keeping up. What are your thoughts on
Yeah.
leading and lagging?
Yeah, as far as industry applications, certainly, the more advanced, automotive and electronic manufacturing, that they've probably been a little farther down the line, partly because of margins, right? Partly because of employee availability, just partly because they just embrace technology a little more quickly. The real superstars seem to be new construction, right? People that have an enlightened leadership team, and they're building the plant in the process of building the manufacturing facility, and able to therefore deploy more of the technology, build that into their O&M budgeting process, just have that ground up application. It again is much more challenging when you're in a brownfield plant. That the investment in some of the technology is just doesn't work out in the business case.
Any chance you might see additional consolidation within the industry because of this? Because you just can't keep up. You can't. Sometimes regulation and compliance costs will lead to consolidation, or there's software costs of maintaining apps and websites in some industries just drive consolidation. Do you think in some industries this will just drive consolidation because small and mid-sized firms just can't keep up?
Yeah, I guess the market forces, right? I mean, it would be just a matter of the business is going to go to the most efficient, effective provider of that service, right? So certainly it could be some consolidation in that regard. You could imagine that could happen. But, the reality, the technology is actually getting pretty cheap. The sensors, the online or remote sensors, and with 5G coming, there's a lot of conversation now that will allow, some of the smaller companies to be players in this, because the infrastructure costs won't be quite as onerous as they might have been before.
Well, I wrote down enlightened leadership team. I want to be a member. I'm going to start calling the team I work with an enlightened leadership team. I like that phrase. That's what I want to be. All right, I got a bunch of other questions. I'm going to hold them and collect more, and we'll hit you up at the end. So save some time because I got a bunch.
Okay. All right. So let's unpack this a little bit from here. And we'll talk with as I said on our timeline, we do believe they're kind of hierarchical. So let's talk about the people first. We are huge believers, and certainly our experience supports that. We have to get the people aligned. I mean, certainly we can do it from the top. We can just mandate, and we can just tell people, here's your new job, and here's how you should better do your job. But we know that to truly create organizational change, to truly create sustainability, and within the organization, we need to engage the people that actually are doing the work in that journey. So managing the people side of change is critical, and we need to set that vision for them. Here's what we're trying to do. This is something that may affect your job. Will you please go on this journey with us and help us work through the best way to apply these things, help them understand and get signed up for that. So we use organizational change management methodology. Personally, we use Prosol. There's many of them out there, but it defines this as an application of a structured process, a set of tools to lead the people side of change to achieve the desired outcome. Certainly I wish I'd had these tools in my toolbox when I was in the plants years and years ago, because it's from my time here at the LCE, it's been one of the key differentials in the success of projects that we've done when we do transformations with clients, when they truly embrace a set of tools like we have here. And as an engineer, I love tools, right? I love that it's not just all touchy-feely. I need to have some kumbaya moments with my team, but really there are some tools that I can work through in a process that will help me make sure that I'm checking that box and accomplishing those objectives. So, and why is that? I mean, the achievements of the organization are really the results of a combined effort of the individual. In other words, companies don't change, people change. People within the company change. So the company can go on a mission, but until the critical mass of the people within the company embrace that new world and embrace those changes, we really have not accomplished change. We're still going to revert back to our old ways. And worst case, we create resistance within the organization because they say, well, they didn't ask me, so I'm going to make sure I show them why this was the worst idea they could have possibly ever had, right? So great initiatives can fail without engaging the workforce. And again, there are great tools and processes. Now, that's not being a Pollyanna here. I mean, it's not like everybody's going to get on board with the change. I mean, usually there's 20 to 30% of people that, for a wide variety of reasons, just don't want to participate. They just don't want to do it anymore. And sometimes that doesn't mean they're bad employees. It just might mean they're a bad fit for the organization where they want to go. And you have to deal with that. But one of those tools I talked about is a resistance management plan. That's part of that toolkit of the Prosol tools. So there is recognition that once we've explained it to them, we've given them an opportunity to participate, we've coached them, we've sought to understand why they resist, then at some point we just have to decide, okay, how impactful is that to the success of the project, and we have to address that. So it really means, again, working through the organization's cultures, the roles, how will they change, how we best prepare people for that. will likely include some new skills development, as I mentioned earlier, right? I mean, in this 4.0 world, there's going to be new roles, a way to interact with things. And maybe somebody that's been there for 30 years and they've always interacted with their machine in a certain way. That's going to be a very challenging thing for them to get their mind around the fact that now we have this online monitoring system and these cobots and these other things that are going to give you input, and then you need to respond to that. It may mean we need new roles in our organization, like reliability engineers or data scientists. Even as important as reliability is recognized to be, I mean, the majority of clients we deal with don't have a designated reliability engineer in the organization looking at their data and making continuous improvements, which is always quite shocking to me. I was a reliability engineer 20 years ago, so I'm kind of surprised to still deal with industries that don't see that as a critical role in their organization. And as I mentioned, a systematic structured change management plan. How we schedule, communicate, train, et cetera. Those are critical steps in our change management journey. And then, as we say, then we believe the processes. The processes are really those standard work, the SOPs, the procedures, the tools, the templates. How are we going to make sure that we all understand the objective, that we collect the right information at the right time in the right format and put it in the right place, that we can leverage the technology such that we've built a robust data set. We've all heard the saying, garbage in, garbage out. I mean, a computer can't invent information that's not there, so we have to start from scratch. I think we've got a white paper out on the building blocks for digital transformation that talk about, have you set your hierarchy up? Have you done your criticality? Do you understand the failure modes? Have you developed your maintenance strategies? And do you collect information at the right level such that it can be fed into this system? Do you have process control information? Do you know where your stops are occurring and where your bottlenecks are occurring on your line? All those things are part of those processes. Those are the how are we going to go out and get the right information and help us understand the context of it. Some of those processes I just mentioned, asset management, work management, materials management, reliability engineering, production processes. Again, highly variable depending on your business and what you're making or what your critical process flow is for your end product. But there are libraries of information out there on best practices, processes to set this up for success, make sure we have the information we need to leverage the technology. So then we can get to the technology. Again, we go through this, and I know this is fairly high level, but again, we could spend lots and lots of hours talking about the nuances of this. But once we've got the people engaged in the journey, once we've got the processes, developing the right materials, the right information, now we can find the right technology that's going to most effectively translate that data into usable information, right? That we can get to the right person at the right time with the right level of detail, that they can actually intercede in that operation and prevent scrap, prevent downtime, all those things that they might do. Also includes the cybersecurity. Again, that's that one you can't. That's certainly you read the news. The issues there with cybersecurity and people's systems getting hacked, and then they can't run the process. So cybersecurity is a huge portion of this. If we're going to rely on the technology, we need to make sure we have the right people interacting in our data and not the wrong people getting in there. But just keep in mind when we're talking technology, though, it's not an IT project, right? Industry 4.0 digitalization is not an IT project any more than buying a new CMMS or MRP system, or those are not IT projects. IT may be part of the solution provider. They may be the group that helps deploy the technology, but certainly it's not just an IT project. You want to have the stakeholders in that, the production, the maintenance, and the procurement, and the supply chain people involved in setting the requirements and the objectives of the project. So, so don't think of this as an IT project. So ultimately, again, we're trying to align the people, the process, technology, the physical assets to make organizational data meaningful and actionable, right? That's the whole objective of this and again, scalable up and down, very complex, very simple, depending on your organization, but that's really what we're trying to do. Those are the kind of the theme that we're looking at. So, so break this down a little bit next level. If we say that first flow timeline was kind of 100,000 foot, maybe we're down at 30,000 feet now, but but again, just creating that vision, making sure we understand the organization, we engage our workforce, our change management. We want to complete that stakeholder analysis we talked about, define the value stream and what matters in our production. What, when this happens, what impact does that have on our finished product and our stakeholder requirements? Assess our current state, right? So once we've kind of got that laid out, we can go out there and do some gap assessments against, lots of good tools out there to help you understand the status of your work processes, of your data systems, of your IT systems. Some good, but assessments happen there. From the assessments, we can build our project roadmap. We can, part of that project roadmap is the return on investment, the business case for change. So we can build that roadmap out, create our people development plan, update our processes based on our roadmap, align our technology, and then we can start building some simulation models, some basic simulation models in the high value areas, so we can start as our proof of concept that truly there's an application not only for the technology and it's cool and fun to build, but it actually provides value to our organization by making a process more efficient. Identify our likely failures. We believe in FMEA's RCM type studies to understand the failure modes. Design those mitigation strategies. So how are we going to control that? Is it operator care? Is it maintenance tasks? Is it recapitalization? What is our mitigation strategy? Define our set points and our alarms, so we understand how are we going to monitor the system? What information are we going to use to create actions? Develop our KPIs, so we know that this system is effective and working. Monitor our results compared to our requirements, and then continuous improvement, right? Once we've got this system in place, it's a plan, do, check, act system. We want to put this in place, but make sure that, because again, stakeholder requirements change, reliability of assets change, risk changes over time. So there's always a continuous loop on here to make sure that our system is still performing as designed. So I think that it's a summary, just set that vision. Look for the optimal blend of people, process, technologies within the organizational context. So stakeholder analysis. It's not an IT project. Business processes will need to be changed across the organization, right? So this is not an IT maintenance operation thing. This is, we all need to understand our role in asset management and therefore have input into the system and have processes that generate the right data. And, think about continuous improvement, right? We know we could set the perfect system up today. A year from now, we will have missed things. Things won't be performing because risk has changed over time. And then don't forget the people. I think that's it, Robert.
Rick, question number one. Earlier in the presentation, you had talked about big data and predictive analytics. And there was a question around ensuring data accuracy. Any best practices and ensuring that the data is accurate so the predictive analytics are good and the decisions can be good?
Yeah, so that's where we go through that leverage of the value stream map and the FMEA activities. So once we know where the bottlenecks are, we understand what critical systems we're looking at, then we understand what the failure modes are. Then we can see what's our best method to collect early indications of that failure mode occurring. So how do we get the right information? Because a lot of new equipment has loads and loads of sensors, and you can create lots and lots of information, but how do you really make that an actionable item is a trick. You have to apply that back to what are the machines telling me matters from the quality of my product or the impact of my ability to meet my requirements.
You encounter any issues with users just not realizing codes and things they're entering into the database being really important and creating false issues, false problems?
Yeah, typically more of the problem is people say I'm required to collect a bunch of information, but I never see anybody do anything with it. So pretty quickly they figure out this is just a game, and I'm just going to pick the first one on the list, right? So actually, what we usually experience is people just pick the first one they have to pick. If they're forced to go in there and pick a code, nobody cares. I'll just pick the first one. What's the easiest thing, right? So it's almost more of a failure of the system to do anything with it, because I think people are more than happy if you've engaged them and they understand, if I put this stuff in, you're going to come make my life better, my personal life better, because my machine's going to run better. They are more than happy to provide the information you're asking for. But if they see you're just playing a game and not really doing anything with that, then yeah, they will play the game with you and just check the first box.
You talked a lot about skilled workforce and changing roles. Any advice you give for young professionals about education, training, certification, or thinking about different kind of career jobs or new roles under this 4.0 framework?
Well, I think, certainly that, embracing technology, and I suspect, most college age people are already doing that, right? They grew up with cell phones in their hands, so they're certainly a different point than the baby boomers from having an understanding of the technology. But certainly, engineering roles with understanding of data scientists and those kind of things, there will certainly be a bigger and bigger call for people that have that kind of experience. Robotics, I mean, robots are great, but somebody's got to maintain, program, repair robots. So there's those kind of industries will probably be some good growth in the next years as this gets more and more adopted. And those roles just transition from being traditional factory roles into more tech type of job.
Rick, we talked a lot about equipment and software and sensors. And in my manufacturing days as a CFO, I've bought a lot of equipment and technology and sensors. And the technology, sensor, and equipment people, that's all, they just sell that and then they like drop it off in a box and wished me well. And so, like, what's the role? And my implementations always didn't go that great, and I didn't always get the bang for the buck that I'd put in the justification. So, what role is the internal team? Is the OEM a consultant for implementation? Like, how could I have done this right? Because I was obviously doing it wrong.
Yeah, I think a lot of new equipment has more sensors and more data coming out of it than we really know what to do with. And again, they're building the generic. Hey, here's all the things you can learn from this piece of equipment, but you have to apply that back to go, okay, what matters in my application of it? And then how does that get integrated into that bigger data pool that it's the right information in the right format that I can use AI or even people looking at that data. So yeah, it's a challenge, but having that integrated roadmap of how I'm going to use my ITOT stack, as they call it, or how am I going to build this lattice of information coming from these equipments. Recently working with a client that bought a multi-million-dollar line, but they bought it from 3 different manufacturers, and each component of that line has some great technology, but it's not integrated to the next unit operation downstream. So we're actually working with them now to help them. Okay, here's how we need to pull all that out. Many times it could be a third-party software package that, like a Power BI or some other system, that you can pull all that information from their native system and put it into a format that now is accessible across the line.
Do you think then engaging in it starts at the beginning of that process, the beginning of the bubbles in your charts when you're doing the stakeholder analysis, or like when is the right time to engage?
Yeah. Certainly. Well, certainly, if you're as early in the process of designing, building, deploying a piece of equipment, you can do this, the more you can integrate that from the beginning. It's not that you can't do it on the back end. It's just the cost goes up as you get further past the design stage and the installation phase, validation phase. Now, if I'm into my operating phase, well, okay, I can still go out and do, but I've got to add equipment. I've got to adjust some integration points, so it gets more expensive. And if you can build that into your specifications on the front end, here's the output we're expecting. Here's the data we want from you. We are actually working with some equipment manufacturers to build those kind of packages that they can offer to their customers as they buy their equipment. Hey, here's what we can provide to you based on some work we've done with lifecycle engineering.
I got 4 more questions. We got 4 minutes, so you get 1 minute per answer. is we talked a lot about IT, and we're accountants, right? So IT budgets. You seeing anything? The question is IT budgets and investments. Any benchmark, any data about the cost of these tools, and anything other than more or up? You got any more details on what we can expect to see?
Yeah. We actually was just looking at a study this week that has some pretty detailed stuff, Robert. So I can kind of share that with you, and we can kind of figure out how you want to distribute that. But there is a lot of good market data now on what technology and implementation budgets are being, and how people are growing that, where they're putting their money, what aspects of Industry 4.0 they're investing in. So yeah, we have some good benchmark data on that.
Rick, do you recommend when buying new technology or equipment, adopting it as designed by the OEM or the software company, or customizing? Do you have a stake in the ground anywhere in the customize hat, or the just take what they give you and adopt those practices camp? Any thoughts?
Yeah, the only thought I have on that is I think, so years ago, when I was a reliability engineer, we invested in a lot of predictive maintenance technology, and there was several different leaders in that field, and they all had their own proprietary software and output, so it wouldn't integrate. But over the years, what you've seen now is they went to a standard, so there's been standards created. So I think you'll see the same thing in these manufacturers as the market starts pushing them toward, we want the standard data output format. You're going to see them come more to building because you can understand it's in their best interest to do proprietary stuff. That way you got to stay with them. But I think the marketplace is going to push them to create more standard outputs and accessibility of the data.
Do you think that hybrid or remote work models will increase as we go through this digital transformation, Industry 4.0, distributive enterprises? What are your thoughts on, you think we'll see more or less hybrid, flex, remote work?
Well, I think the roles that I think of that are today, or have moved to remote since the COVID. I think those will stay those market preferences will be where they are. I think still on the manufacturing side and facility side, there still requires some level of being there. Although certainly many of our clients were managed to operate and run their facilities with skeleton crews and remote support during the COVID period. So I think there's certainly, I would say, probably stabilized, and now I think there's still going to be some benefit, obviously, of having people that are on the production line still need to be on the production line. So because even if the machine tells you something's going wrong, until the robot's there to fix it, somebody's going to have to go over there and make that adjustment and address that problem.
Rick, you talked a little bit about mixed reality, virtual reality in Industry 4.0 as it pertains to training. You got any more use cases or examples of that mixed reality in Industry 4.0 use case?
Yeah, so certainly that's been one of the early applications of the technology. Is we're working with a client now, and we built some AR/VR training tools for them, so a person sitting in a remote office could watch over the shoulder as a technician that maybe with not as much experience is out there, adjusting, in this case, valve lash on a diesel generator, right? So as they're doing that, this person can kind of watch them and say, no, that's not it, put right there. And again, you can have even scripts running, you can have a video running of what it's supposed to do, and the person can be looking through there and actually physically looking at the piece of equipment. So certainly, training has been one of the early adopters for the AR/VR, and it's a pretty effective way to address the skills gap, right? If people don't have 30 years as a millwright, if I understand basically how not to put my hand in the wrong spot and get my fingers nipped off, I can probably get this job done with the help of a remote coach.
Rick, that was fantastic. And in your presentation, you mentioned something I am super passionate about, which is the idea of leaning the processes first, making sure the processes are critical and as efficient as they can possibly be before adding in robotic process automation or AI or any sort of technology. Why make something automated if it shouldn't be done at all? So yep. I love it. Great presentation. I wrote down enlightened leadership team. I want to be referenced as a member of an enlightened leadership team at some point this month. And I love the question about living in an industry 1.0 world while everyone else is graduating to 4.0. I pray for that person. I've worked at companies like that. And how important to talk about the people side of change is still important in Industry 4.0. If there is more than one person in the plant, even with the lights off, then the people side of change is really important. So great job. This was excellent. This digital transformation, if you're on one or if you're part on an Industry 4.0 journey, you don't have to go it alone. Rick Wheeler and the rest of the team at Lifecycle Engineering, they are amazing. And I will share Rick's contact info. I'll share some additional resources that Rick referenced, maybe like that the budgeting benchmarking information on technology that he was seeing. I'll share that, and a copy of this deck in an email I'll send out to all members tomorrow. And please, as always, like, comment, and share my content on LinkedIn. It's a great way to spread the word about the CFO Council. And to thank Rick. Thank you, Rick. This was fantastic. Have a great day.
Thank you.